Hezbollah is turning the residents of southern Lebanon into a human shield amidst the surge in violence along Israel's northern border, despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah being extended until next month. Meanwhile, a Lebanese National Army unit has moved into a terror tunnel that Hezbollah originally built to be used against Israel. The IDF has identified and plans to demolish dozens of such tunnels and underground bunkers all over southern Lebanon in the weeks to come, mainly in the eastern sector of southern Lebanon. The army is also setting up outposts between civilian communities and the border fence. For their part, Hezbollah is going in the opposite direction, stirring up crowds of Lebanese civilians to try and move back into the villages of southern Lebanon, despite warnings from the IDF not to approach and half-hearted efforts by the Lebanese National Army to stop them. On Sunday, this resulted in incidents that required the IDF to fire warning shots, and in the confusion of events, 22 people were killed and many more were wounded, leading to a wave of fierce criticism against Hezbollah. In Judea and Samaria, the security operation is expanding after several days of sweeps in the city of Jenin. An October 7th style attack that was planned to be carried out from within the Nur el-Shams camp was broken up by security forces. We'll take a closer look at this region, which has become the area with the IDF's highest operational tempo. In the Gaza Strip, the ceasefire is holding out, but there is evidence that Hamas has now had enough and is using this time to quietly regroup, reorganize, and get ready for another round of fighting. They say in their public statements that they want an end to this war, but their actions tell a different story, and Iran is pushing them to pursue an agenda of disruption and chaos. Hamas is also celebrating as if they have won a great victory over the IDF in this war, but the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs has published a report containing some raw data for everyone interested in the truth. Hamas's attempt to mark an image of victory against the backdrop of Gaza's ruins and its eliminated leaders is an act of deceit and also desperation. Meanwhile, there is already talk about a Marshall Plan for Gaza, raising questions about what would the blueprint for defeating Hamas and rebuilding the Gaza Strip will look like. It would have to start with the disarmament of all terrorist groups operating there, and it will also have to include educational programs and economic development in the style of the United Arab Emirates. There is much ahead, and let's not forget that on Thursday and on Saturday, 3 more of our hostages will be released from Hamas, and also next Saturday, 3 more. Later in the report, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will give us a look at what is happening in our neighborhood and how Israel will deal with the recent power shift. I want to remind you that on TBN Israel's YouTube channel, we will be broadcasting the release and will bring you all the details. So hit the subscribe button if you want to know the truth about Israel and join us in praying for the peace of Jerusalem, this city here behind me. Now, let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 481 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and the armed Palestinian groups in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Today's video is brought to you by Arza Box. Start the year of fright by bringing the beauty and blessings of Israel into your home with an Arta subscription, you'll enjoy a curated selection of handcrafted products and delicious treats from the Holy Land. We'll share more about it later in the report, but first, the news. Despite the extension of the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, which was approved by Lebanon's interim prime minister on Monday, the IDF and the Air Force continued to strike in Lebanon. According to reports in Arab media portals, around 14 people were injured in a strike on Monday on a truck traveling in the Nabatia el-Fawaka in southern Lebanon. Later in the evening, another strike was reported, saying that an Israeli UAV struck a vehicle also in the Nabatia el-Fawaka. According to claims in Lebanon, about 24 people were affected today during these strikes. A statement by the IDF spokesperson's unit said of the incident that Air Force aircrafts struck in the past hour to remove a threat posed by a truck and another vehicle belonging to the Hezbollah terrorist organization, which was transporting weapons in the Shakif and Nabatia areas of southern Lebanon. The truck and the vehicle were attacked after being monitored by the IDF while they transferred the weapons. As is known, at the start of the week, the IDF assessed that it would need to stay in southern Lebanon for an additional period of about a month to complete a survey of the region and make sure that all Hezbollah tunnels, bunkers, and other attack infrastructure has been demolished. Following the United States announcement earlier this week about reaching agreements to extend the ceasefire, Hezbollah tried something new. They have begun to provoke riots along the border, sending hundreds of operatives with the organization's flags into the crowds of residents who are waiting to return to their villages in the area. The purpose is to stir up these villagers so they'll try to move back into their areas despite the continued presence of the IDF, who are there to clear the area of Hezbollah infrastructure. The attempt to start further disturbances has mostly failed, and the riots have subsided with a tense calm prevailing along the border area as of Wednesday morning. It is important to point out that the Lebanese army feared and still fears confronting Hezbollah, which is still much more powerful than the regular army, despite the pounding that it has taken from Israel in the past year and a few months. As the IDF continues to dismantle the Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon, it should make it easier for the Lebanese army to do its job. At the same time, the IDF's demonstration of resolve in pushing back Hezbollah's attempts to stir up riots earlier this week appears to have had a sobering effect on the organization. They realize how vulnerable they are, and their enemies within Lebanon are growing more confident to confront them. The attempt to use the residents of southern Lebanon as pawns and human shields in their confrontation with the IDF ended in a humiliating failure for Hezbollah. Their opponents loudly blamed them for the deaths and injuries which resulted from these actions. For that matter, the Lebanese government is obviously very pleased with the IDF's continued presence in the country, as it is serving as a shield against Iranian influence, which gives time for them to build up their own institutions. The IDF has estimated that it would need to stay for about another month to inspect all of southern Lebanon from the Saluki to the coastline. These surveys are meant to discover and demolish what's left of Hezbollah's network of arms depots, fighting positions, tunnels, and bunkers. They are hidden inside the terrain, in the forested areas, and even under the rubble of destroyed buildings and ancient ruins. Every single day, caches of weapons, ammunition, and equipment are found, with much of it being destroyed in place, while some of it is brought back to warehouses in Israel. The mission of searching for all this terrorist infrastructure is supposed to be carried out by the Lebanese National Army, but as noted, they lack the motivation and probably also the capacity to carry this mission out successfully. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development on the northern border in this war against the Hezbollah terrorist organization, and we invite you to stay tuned to the truth by following us on YouTube at TBN Israel to receive daily boots-on-the-ground reports. Our mission is to share the truth about Israel and unite the world in prayer, as this is a spiritual war that involves all of us. You can also directly support our activity and help us create more content at tbnisrael.com/give. We need your support. And now we'll turn to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will guide us through what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East, and how Trump's plan for clearing up the Gaza Strip is set to operate. Take it from here, Mati Shoshani.
Thank you, Yair. Now we turn to something completely different. The unexpected people affected by the shift of power here in the Middle East. Now hold on with us just a second, because this is going to be a tiny bit complicated. So in a quick summary, over the last 15 months, Israel, together with the help of the US, and to a lesser degree several other countries in this region, has pushed back Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah in Lebanon. We have seen the toppling of the Assad regime, was propped up by the Iranians within Syria proper. We've seen the Russians push back in this region. We've had fighting against the Houthis and direct strikes in Iran. And who, in the last couple of weeks, is in the headlines stating that they don't want to get involved in a conflict against Israel? You wouldn't guess, but it's the Iraqi government. Yes, the Iraqi government, which is largely supported and influenced heavily by the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been speaking up publicly for the first time in such clear words against fights or conflict with the state of Israel. So let's break down what that means. We've seen footage come out from within Iraq in recent weeks, and to a much lesser degree beforehand, of several of their government ministers and several militia leaders within the country speak up against strongly Iranian involvement within Iraq, and more importantly, any attempt to force Iranian-backed militias, these would be Shia militias within Iraq, and Iraq, just for reference, is a country that has many flavors of Islam within it and many ethnic and religious minorities. So this is the central government speaking against the Shia militias, firing rockets, making any kind of pro-Iranian moves, especially anything that would attack or go against the state of Israel. And why are they doing that? Well, they have a very clear answer. If you see the footage, and I hope it's on the screen right now, you'll be able to see them strongly state, and you'll see this on their national news, they'll reference the footage of what's been happening in the Gaza Strip and say, Iran, why would you compel us to go down the same route as what you've done to Hamas, or you've done to others like Hezbollah? They're aware of the shift of power in the Middle East. They're aware of the fact that the Iranians that were once considered to be almost this unstoppable force of evil, or anti-Israel force within the Middle East, I guess from their perspective, has lost a lot of its foothold, a huge amount of its grip, a huge amount of its influence in this region. So what does that mean? Let's think about this equation and how it's shifting the power balance in the Middle East. About 15 months ago, before October 7th, if you asked yourself, what did Iran have against Israel and the Axis powers of Israel? So that would be the US, the UK to a lesser degree, and several other of the Abraham Accord countries in this region, the Iranians had what they called the doctrine of the circle of fire around the state of Israel. They had Hamas, they had Hezbollah, they had Houthis, they had the ability to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles directly against the state of Israel. And almost all of that is gone now. And what we're seeing is, and here's the key word in this entire segment, we're seeing the increase in the force of retaliation, or the force of Israel's perception of power within the Middle East at the expense of the Iranians in this region. And that's very important, because everything in the Middle East, and I dare say everything around the world, when it comes to hard diplomacy, has to do with the perception of your power and the expectation of what you can do to retaliate if someone attacks you. So for the first time, we're seeing a new voice come out of multiple Arab countries. We're seeing people in Lebanon saying out with Hezbollah, out with the Iranian influence in this country. We're seeing the same happen within Syria, where IRGC forces were pushed out to a certain degree. We're seeing the same thing happen once again in Iraq, a country that has suffered from an incredibly strong influence by the Iranians, who've influenced factions. They've been involved allegedly in the assassination of political leaders in the country. They've used a whole lot of power and money to affect their will on the Iraqi people. And what we're seeing now with these clips and these voices that are coming out is a shift in the perception of power and a strong call from within Iraqi people to say, we don't want Iranian involvement, and we don't want you pushing us into the hands of the Israelis and their allies. And that's a good thing. That is a voice of stability. That is a voice of strength. That is a voice of reason within the Middle East. And if we think 2 steps forward to what a US, Saudi, Israel engagement accords could look like in relation to the Abraham Accords, this would be a step in that direction. A shift in the perception of what the Iranians can do in a negative sense, and an uptick in the perception of Israel's ability to effect revenge against its enemies and to bring stability and peace to the region. And at the end, this is all about people. And the people that benefit from this are the Iraqi people. Them pushing back against the Iranians is a good thing. Them pushing back against engagement in violent conflict with Israel is a positive thing for the Iraqi people and by extension to the Iranian people. So let's fit this equation into one picture. If Iran is weakened in the Middle East, then it is good for the people of the countries around us because it allows them stability in their government. Because throughout history in this region, the footprint of the Iranian, specifically the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the footprint of their operations has been to destabilize, to weaken, and to suck the life out of an economy and out of a people. So them being pushed out of Hamas involvement, Hezbollah involvement, Houthi involvement, and now Iraqi involvement is a huge positive thing. For us as Israelis, it makes us happy to see that we don't have to necessarily fly into Iraq on bombing missions to know that they understand that we're willing to exact power and violence on them if needed, and that will prevent them from engaging in warfare against Israel. Because again, the Iranian philosophy is always, and has been and will be, proxy warfare. So if their proxies are saying, thank you, we've had enough of fighting on your side, we want peace, we want stability, we don't want to fight with the Israelis or their American allies, that's a positive thing for us, and it's a positive thing for them. And that is one of the good outcomes of this last war, because there have been many negative ones, but this is a very positive outcome where now we're seeing the shift in the perception of power balances within the Middle East. What is the expression in English? And now on to something entirely different. So President Trump has been floating this idea for the last week, give or take, that he wants to remove population from the Gaza Strip and move it into Arab countries. If we want to be specific, what he's been saying is that he's suggesting, and he's spoken to the King of Jordan and the President of Egypt about the idea of removing up to 1.5 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Jordan and to Egypt and possibly to other countries, as he calls them. And with President Trump, people are wondering whether or not this is a serious statement or he's floating an idea to position himself and Israel and the United States and its interest in this region for a coming up negotiation about an entirely different topic, because that's something he's done before. Well, let's examine this idea that he's proposing. First of all, he's not talking about a forceful removal of people. The idea he stated was the destruction of the Gaza Strip is too great and there's a need to remove the people there to another country so the Gaza Strip can be recovered and they can return to other homes. Now, that's sort of where people fall apart with this idea. They lose the hope or the belief that they will return to their homes. But it is an interesting idea. We've seen many movements of people, especially post-conflict in this region, even with the Palestinians, and I'll get to that in a second. But President Trump is suggesting something very interesting. He's saying, and bear with me for a minute because I know this is politically tense, he's saying the following: look, let's move some of these people into a better life. There are other countries that can accommodate the movement of people. There are financial mechanisms to allow, to enable, to help promote this idea, to give a better life to some of these people. And if we jump to the end of this conversation, the end of this thought process, the best thing for the people of Gaza would be to have Hamas government removed and them have a positive, democratic, liberal to a certain degree as much as possible, governance that would rebuild the Gaza Strip. And with a lack of that option, which is currently the case in the Gaza Strip, there is another alternative. Completely remove Hamas from the Gaza Strip. And if you can't do that, he has possibly an idea that's saying, and this is President Trump, well, maybe we let some of these people have a better life elsewhere. And this has happened. It's happened in the Gaza Strip, post or pre-war, pre-October 7th, 2023. At least 100,000 Palestinians from the Gaza Strip have willingly left. This is with no connection to this current war. Left and move on to other countries just in the last couple years. Some of them are in Egypt, many of them ended up in Europe. So this is something that happens. This is, by the way, something that also happens with other conflicts. When you're trying to bring peace into a region, you sometimes have to move populations. Now, I have a pop quiz for you guys. I think this is going to be interesting, which is the Palestinians' rhetoric or the Palestinians' narrative states that Israel is responsible for the biggest displacement of Palestinians. And that is both true and not true. In 1948, there's a huge population exchange in this region where, let's say, roughly up to 700,000 Palestinians or inhabitants of this land leave after the war between Israel and multiple other Arab countries. But at the same time, a much larger number of Jews are forced out of Arab countries based on a decision of the Arab League back in the early 50s. And this happened also unofficially beforehand, but there is let's call it an exchange of population that can take place to bring stability or to exchange a population that is at conflict in a region. But here's another interesting fact. The biggest movement of Palestinian people since, in my lifetime for sure, but definitely in the last 50 years, has been the forced expulsion of Palestinians from Kuwait in the 90s for no substantial reason, unless you want to look at its political orientation as a substantial reason, where up to 400,000 Palestinians were forced out of Kuwait. And of course, no one talks about that because we're always talking about Israel's involvement in this. And yes, our goal as Israel should be, and for the US and for any other entity involved, should be to rehabilitate and build a better life for the people of Gaza. But, and this is possibly where President Trump is going with this thought process, the road to a better life for the people of Gaza might be removing a substantial number of Hamas combatants and leadership from the Gaza Strip to another part of the world, which is something many countries push back against for obvious reasons. Who wants to have such a large number of terrorist leaders in their own country? That makes sense completely. And another option is saying we want to allow a better life while we're rebuilding, and this is going to take a while, for a good number of these people. And to do that, we're going to open up the financial doors. To do that, we're going to open up the political and diplomatic doors for them to transition to other countries. At the end, there's likely an ulterior motive here for President Trump in making these statements. And the motive might be reshaping power balances between the US, Jordan, the Egyptians, and Hamas, propping up the pieces to reach a different agreement which involves them being or part of a solution or maybe a smaller population movement for rehabilitation of certain people. What it is, though, is a very interesting experiment into the lack of Arab solidarity towards what's happening in the Gaza Strip. I mean, you see this immediate, visceral, negative response. And on the same side, it's an option also to think outside of the box. And if anything is true, that's what the Trump administration often brings us in the Middle East, is the question of, well, why not? And sometimes that's a very fresh thing to do in diplomacy and specifically in the Middle East. Now back to you, Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for that important information. And now that we know what's happening in our neighborhood, if you want to receive daily boots on the ground updates, please subscribe to TBN Israel's YouTube channel so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And please, unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem. As we report from TBN Israel, there's a ceasefire for now, but no one knows how long it will hold. In the meantime, the people of Israel are hard at work rebuilding and recovering. Areas near the Gaza Strip and the Lebanese border have been hit especially hard, with businesses and families struggling to get back on their feet. If you've been wondering how you can support Israel during this difficult time, here's a meaningful way to make an impact. Even if you can't visit us just yet, you can still bring a piece of Israel into your home. Arza Box is a subscription box that showcases the best of Israel, handcrafted items, delicious foods, and unique treasures made by local artisans here in the land of Israel. The name Arza means towards the land in Hebrew. It reflects the heart of this initiative, connecting you with the people and stories of Israel. Each Arsa box is packed with care, offering not just a gift for yourself or your loved ones, but hope and encouragement for the artisans and small businesses of the State of Israel. So please visit www.arsabox.com and use our exclusive 10% discount code TBNIL to order your box today. Together, we can share blessings with Israel and spread the message of hope around the world. And now, we move on to the Judea and Samaria sector. Well, over the past week, the IDF has been conducting Operation Iron Walls in the Jenin area. This is considered the largest operation so far in northern Samaria. The fighting is led by the Egoz unit, the Dudevan unit, the Haruv reconnaissance unit, and the Nachshon battalion. In the operation that began in recent days in Tulkarem, 2 terrorists have already been eliminated, including the head of the terrorist organization in the city, and about 20 explosive devices have been detonated. Also this week, an October 7th style attack on Israeli communities in the heart of Israel was broken up by the security forces who hit a terrorist cell in the Nur el-Shams area. Dudevan fighters eliminated more than 10 terrorists in the action, on the ground and from the air, carrying out nighttime ambushes and daytime searches. The forces tried to reach the last armed militant, locating weapon stockpiles in the camp and also the command centers of the terrorist groups, throughout which they apparently planned the scheme that prompted the unit to launch its planned infiltration attack into Israeli territory by dozens of armed men inspired by the murderous terrorist attacks of October 7, 2023. The threat level dropped after the operation, but Central Command estimates it's only a matter of time before the IDF will have to return to that location, just as they have raided the hostile camp dozens of times in the last 2 years. In the Tulkarem operation, the fighters also located explosive labs for making bombs, labs for manufacturing weapons, and bombs with cell phone triggered mechanisms hidden within children's school bags. The background for all of this is that Hamas is active in multiple sectors, and although it has been massively degraded in the Gaza Strip, it is rising in popularity amongst the Palestinian population in Judea and Samaria. Iran is taking advantage of this to send money and weapons into these areas so that Hamas can increase its power in these areas and create problems for both Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on these developments, and we ask you to help us spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube and following us on social media. We also invite you to visit our news website, tbnisrael.com. You can get updates in between the videos on YouTube. Now, we switch our focus to the Gaza Strip. Tuesday was a complex day for the IDF forces that are still deployed across the Gaza Strip. According to the agreement between Israel and Hamas, pedestrian and vehicle movement was allowed from the southern and central parts of Gaza towards the northern part of the Strip and Gaza City. Under the terms of the agreement, all vehicles traveling north must undergo inspection by trained forces from an American security firm brought in especially to conduct vehicle inspections to ensure no significant weapons are transferred to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. To no one's surprise, Hamas made several attempts to test the IDF's patience by dispatching Gazan residents along these routes with instructions to break the rules that were agreed upon prior to this movement starting. A statement by the IDF spokesperson's office gave some details of these attempts and the IDF's response to them. In a statement it published, the IDF confirmed that in several areas of the Gaza Strip, a number of incidents were identified in which suspects moved towards the forces of the IDF and posed a threat. The fighters responded with warning shots. The IDF statement read that in the central part of the Gaza Strip, an aircraft fired to drive away suspicious vehicles moving north in an area not authorized for movement under the agreement without inspection, thus violating the agreed outline. The IDF is determining to fully implement the terms of the agreement for the return of the hostages. The IDF is prepared for any scenario and will continue to take all necessary actions to remove any immediate threat to the IDF soldiers. The IDF once again calls on the Palestinian residents to follow the IDF instructions and not to approach the forces that are deployed in the area. While all of this is going on, Hamas has not stopped its propaganda campaigns. In recent days, it has been making desperate attempts to paint a picture of victory against Israel, claiming that the murderers supposedly won the war. This is being accompanied by promises to the residents of the Gaza Strip who see their homes destroyed and their communities shattered that all will be rebuilt and restored. The general message that Hamas is sending to the people of the Gaza Strip is that they have achieved a great victory over Israel, emerging from this war stronger than ever, and they will soon rebuild the Gaza Strip to be even better than what it was before this war started. If I can make a personal observation, it is difficult to imagine that anyone would allow themselves to be gaslighted into believing this ludicrous, absurd narrative, but I'm afraid there is evidence that many Palestinians do believe it. This might be because so many commentators in Western countries are repeating it over and over again, despite the fact that they must know on some level that it isn't true. These Western liberals who claim to care about the Palestinians are not doing them any favors by encouraging them to believe a lie. Nothing good ever comes from believing lies, and you can't build anything positive on a foundation of lies, deceit, and gaslighting. In an effort to remind people of positive things, a short, pleasant clip was published last night by the Arabic language Foreign Ministry account. In the clip, a few simple points were made to try and put things into perspective and see the bigger picture of the war between Israel and Hamas, even after taking into account the painful and costly price of hostage deal that include the release of thousands of terrorists. When certain media mouthpieces market Hamas's victories to viewers, they must look at these important facts, opens the Foreign Ministry fascinating post. The post then gives a handful of data points for everyone to draw their own conclusions from. This includes a statement that before October 7th, there were 3,000 Palestinian security prisoners in Israeli prisons. After October 7, there are 20,000 Palestinian security prisoners held in Israeli prisons. Amongst them are 5,000 Palestinian security prisoners whom Israel insists on expelling from this land. 15,000 of them will remain in Israel. Hamas abducted 251 hostages in October 7th, but robbed the Gazan population of all that they owned. Hamas's own figures placed the number of dead amongst Hamas at 50,000, including 20,000 Hamas terrorists. This is according to IDF data. 120,000 Gazans are permanently disabled. This is according to Hamas sources. 2 million Gazans people are displaced. All the political, military, and security leaders within Hamas and outside it were eliminated. This is also the case for Hezbollah, Syria, and a lot of Iran. If anyone asked me to give a list of data points that have led me to the conclusion that Hamas lost this war and Israel won it, I could give many such points right off the top of my head without even trying very hard. I know, however, that many people are unhappy about the ceasefire deal that included the release of hundreds of Palestinian security prisoners, including many with blood on their hands. While I'm also unhappy about that, I believe that the deal that brought about the release of the female hostages was the best Israeli deal that we could achieve under the existing circumstances. On that note, the hostages who remain in Hamas's hands at the end of the first stage are the organization's insurance policy. It is in no hurry to give up that insurance policy, indicating that the next round of conflict is only a matter of time. Clearly, something needs to change. To turn the next round into the last round, Israel needs to build a comprehensive system. First, it must prepare for a total military resolution that will bring about the elimination of Hamas and its infrastructure, a complete disarmament of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, eliminating tunnels, weapons production infrastructure, and centers of control. In practice, this will mean achieving full security control and establishing integral monitoring mechanisms with international forces. For their part, the Palestinians need to stop gaslighting themselves and their so-called supporters around the world who claim to care about these people. We must tell them the difficult but undeniable truth. If they want to have a better life, they need to give up their dreams of having all of this country, from the river to the sea, and instead focus on building something positive with what they already have. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development in the Gaza sector. Stay tuned to the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, click that subscribe button so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I would like to remind all of you that the only reason for all of these attacks and hatred against Israel is spiritual. This is a war between good and evil. God is using Israel to prove to the whole world and to you and me that He is faithful to His promise to the Jewish people, to the people of Israel, for thousands of years. I'm talking about from the time of Exodus from Egypt until this war now that Israel is fighting against multiple enemies and against all odds. And we are still here, not because of our army, but because God is faithful and He is our protector. So if you need a personal encouragement in your life, just look towards Israel and know that our God is faithful always to all the promises that He made to you and to me and to the people of Israel. And remember that prayer works. So please keep praying for our hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip by the Hamas terrorist organizations. And in the coming days, we will see some of them return. We are very excited. Please pray for the IDF soldiers that are fighting in the Gaza Strip, in Judea and Samaria, in Lebanon, in Syria. Pray for their safety. And don't forget to pray for the people of Israel, for all the civilians in this region that are affected by these terrorist organizations, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And together we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.